hopefully that we have established some basic understanding about practice of meditation on the basis of shamatha level of simplicity and indirectness. Seem to be necessary to also present the question of vipassana, which comes after shamatha practice of meditation. According to the tradition, that vipassana is regarded as further experience of egolessness and developing prajna, which means transcendent knowledge, that compared with the shamatha, that vipassana is more concerned with the in dealing with one's inquisitive mind and taking full advantage of it and exploring that and developing, and so fundamentally or finally that sense of exploration of one's mind to become openness, egoless. That there is a problem that we have a general concept or idea that one should control oneself constantly until the point that one begins to obey one's basic given training, and accomplishing training is trying to tighten up unnecessary habits and trying to create a different form of imprisonment. And that has become a problem and misunderstood a great deal. So the question here that what we present in terms of vipassana is a sense of freedom, sense of enlightenment, if you like to call it. That sense of freedom is exploring the sense of a basic awareness, which is a basic fundamental state of our mind of inquisitiveness. So when we're talking about inquisitive mind, we are talking about sense consciousness, which includes the sixth sense, that is the sem that we talked about the other day, the mind. That you would hear sound, you would smell, that you would taste, that you have a feeling, bodily sensations. And you have a sense of being alive. That there is a mental faculty also functions. That those six sense consciousness need to be used. And so far that what we'll be discussing in this area is that those sense perceptions are disregarded, sense consciousness are disregarded. And we haven't even got to that level yet. That we are simply just working on the basic simplicity of keeping our attention with the breath and keeping our experience as simple as possible. Having developed already some sense of simplicity and some sense of accuracy in our practice. That thoughts come and go, but however, that they are expression of simplicity. They come and they go, and so what? However, I'm sitting here on the meditation cushion and practicing meditation, which boils down to absolutely doing nothing and watching your thoughts come and go, them disappear, they come back, and you have your basic breathings taking place. There's a sense of precision as to what's happening there is completely wakeful, because whenever you are drifted, your mind, into thought patterns of past, present, or future, conceptual memories or whatever, you come back. You come back very simply, just come back to the breath, and very simply to the breath, not analyzing, not visualizing breathing, but just simply doing it. Precisely, very ordinarily doing it. Very consciously, conscientiously, in fact, doing that, and day to day, and repetition after repetition, years and years, and weeks and weeks, and days, hours and hours, that we keep on doing that. A lot of problems come up which seemingly to be complicated, confusing, but however, if you could get it back to that particular practice level of simplicity, that the complications dissolve by itself. Because things are so complicated, therefore they take care of themselves, and what you have afterwards is nothing. A very simple situation. That the complications took care of themselves, being complicated, and there's nothing left behind anything at all. So things become somewhat encouraging. But on the other hand, there's possibilities of memories, emotions, aggression, passion, fantasies, all kinds begin to churn out. But even though those are also part of the complications, they take care of themselves. We have nothing to do with them, or we have everything to do with them, whatever. It doesn't matter who's who, what and what, but just simply keep sitting and doing it. That's the Vipassana experience, that's the shamatha experience of simplicity that's taking place there. It's a very honest thing to do. We are not taking advantage of our emotions. We are not dreaming up any new experience or exotic, rich, fantastic dreams, spiritually or otherwise. We are not inventing anything new at all. We are simply just being at what we are, what we have. We have our body, we have our breath, we have our mind, and just dealing with those three principles, just very, very simply. And because of that simplicity, then you begin to find new dimension of experience, what is known as the Vipassana experience, or Laktong in Tibetan, which literally means development of insight, or literally speaking, it means clear seeing. Seeing things very clearly, very precisely, extremely clearly and precisely. Laktong, lak means superior or clear or exquisite. Tong means looking, seeing. So seeing things exquisitely, very precisely. And the shift between the Shine and Laktong, or Vipassana, Shamatha, is in the level of Shamatha, that there is very specialized attentions be put on your practice, and just breath and breath, very direct, very simple, very narrow from that point of view. And in the case of awareness of Vipassana is concerned, it's a slightly extended version of openness, that you begin to find that there is lots of room apart from the object of concentration or breath or your bodily sensations, your whatever you have, that there is lots of more room, great deal of more room that there is experiencing the environment as well as experiencing the object of our attention, namely our technique of breathing. According to Buddha, that he described the state of Laktong or Vipassana is a state of clear seeing, egoless, because that we don't have to concentrate on a particular thing too heavy-handedly, but we begin to realize the environment around our practice, around our breath. So when you start with your breath, you begin to experience that environment around you is also part of the breathing, part of the whole basic being. You begin to feel the space around you, a sense of beingness is extended in a level that there is also state of awareness that we all have our antenna sharpened constantly, that you begin to feel that if you sit and meditate and very earnestly, you begin to find somebody is watching behind your back and looking at your neck and examining you. And you begin to feel that there is a heaviness coming down to you. You begin to feel that your bodily sensations are as if you're wearing a heavy coat or turban. And all kinds of tensions happen in your back of your neck and your buttocks, your legs, and your arms feels awkward. And your body becomes more than there is some point. But those are the vanguard of that of the Vipassana experience, that there is something taking place around you apart from the object of concentration, which is the breath. There's something more than that taking place, more than that's happening. Extended version of that's taking place. And Vipassana is the seed or beginning point of developing meditation and action attitude, that you are able to extend your state of awareness to everyday life situation constantly. That being watchful, being aware of whatever you are doing in your life. But we can't just simply practice on the meditation action level immediately, because we begin to find ourselves not practicing meditation, but we begin to find ourselves entertaining ourselves. That there's a tension that's taking place if you wash up dishes, that you begin to feel entertained by it. You have a little spots of dirt to relate to it. Then you have a plate, then you have the soap, you have the faucet, the water tap. There's a lot of things happening there, and the whole thing becomes somewhat a delightful experience and entertaining. That has become the problem. So we shouldn't try to practice the meditation action in the early stages, which people would say, well, whatever I do is a meditation, I feel good about it, I do everything deliberately, I do my gardening, I do my piano, and I do my washing up dishes, I cook for my husband, my wife, whatever. And I take a ride in the countryside. I read books, and I feel that I'm doing everything very consciously, and I feel very good, and I think I'm meditating. Well, that's very tricky. And there's a lot of deceptions taking place in such kind of naivety experience. That things hadn't happened in 100% level. Things be happening in 50% level, which is not so good. If you're going to trot on the path and are going to practice meditation properly and thoroughly and fully as the Buddha had experienced or given the message to us, we got to do it much better than that, much simpler than that, much more orthodox than that. that room for meditation action is possible, of course, but we have to prepare the ground for that before we do anything. We have to first find out what is this span of our awareness, span of our concentration, span of our watchfulness. That there's a term, mindfulness applies to shamatha experience. Which is being fully there with our techniques and everything. Being completely watchful. Then we have the term awareness, which applies to Vipassana experience, the second stage. If you be too watchful, too mindful, it is possible that you will lose your awareness. That is to say that if you're watching your highway more than necessary, you begin to miss the signposts around the highway because you haven't been aware of them, aware of that you're driving, but you're being mindful you're driving, you're watchful in driving, mindful in driving, that you're so much concerned with your driving and watching the guy in front of you or behind you too much that you lost your exit because you haven't been aware of it. So that's the situation relationship, that it is necessary to begin with to develop that kind of caution and directness of watching the guy in front of us, behind us, as we drive in the highway, and keep your speed limit or whatever, and watch for cops. But then you need something else than that. That is just at a lesser level of being careful. But you can be much greater being careful is developing awareness, aware. In Tibetan terms, there's two words. The first one is called tempa, which means, literally means recollection, memory, sharpness, like mindfulness, tempa. And then there's another word called shijin. Shipa is knowing. Jin means as it is. So knowing things as they are, there's some kind of sense of perspectives involved. And so it is necessary to have both tempa and shijin working together, and particularly paying more attention to the shijin experience as you develop later on in your practice of meditation. But I wouldn't suggest students to shift their practice of meditation at this point, but I would recommend still that you stick to the shamatha practice of the concentration practice at the beginning that we'll be discussing, and working with the out breath and so forth. That seems to be necessary. But if you keep doing that a certain period of time, and maybe at some point that you begin to find that that's not the only thing that's happening to you alone, but you begin to developing some sense of expansion, some sense of greater awareness, greater mindfulness taking place, which is awareness. And that is possible, that should happen, that would happen, provided if you keep faithful to this particular technique that was presented to us and what we are doing. So shijin, or the knowing as it is, knowing things as they are, which is sharpening our antenna, perceptual, visual, smell, sound, feeling, and everything. Sense of expansion is taking place. Taking second look at same analogies of driving motor car and highway, that If we rent a car, at the beginning we are concerned about the accelerations of the car and how to work with the little gadgets it goes with, and the dashboard, and sense of power and a sense of speed at the same time. If you're an experienced driver, then you begin to feel you can tune yourself immediately into the size of the car, how big is the car, how small is the car. Your whole awareness becomes the car, as if the car is your body, if you're a good driver. And you don't miscalculate your size of your being there on the highway, or even for parking for that matter. And you begin to get instant knowledge of awareness rather than mindfulness at that level, that you know how to handle your car, how to park your car, how big is your car, how big you are for that matter, this point. And that is the caution of the awareness of vipassana that we are talking about, is that we should adapt ourselves to that particular situation of sense of perception, sense of radiation, how far our feelings extend, and so that the working situation becomes also appropriate and applicable to our every day-to-day running situation. So the question of vipassana at this point is shijin, or the awareness experience. And when you have that sense of awareness experience taking place in you, you begin to find new discovery, which is that it is not you that operating necessarily, that you really don't exist particularly. It is that is operating. The relationship, the vibration is operating rather than you conducting that particular show. And one begin to feel a sense of hollowness inside you. At the same time, sense of being and very careful, and a sense of being appropriate and real at the same time, of course. But nevertheless, there's a sense of hollowness that you feel that you are not operating that, but it is taking happen. It's happening. That in fact the car is driving you rather than you are driving the car, in some sense. That the car goes by itself, and you just put little energy, but it is not up to you particularly. Whereas if you're a bad driver, that you begin to feel lots of you, because you're taking all kinds of chances, and you kind of do all kinds of dangerous things, and there's more sense of you involved. Whereas if you're a confident driver, you have a proper relationship with your motor car, that you have a sense of being there, that you just move a little bit and the car just goes, which is not your movement, but it's movement of the car dictates to you. So awareness dictates you from that point of view. That awareness becomes a part of your basic being, part of your behavior, that you don't have to meditate as such, but meditation is conducting you, rather than you are conducting practice of meditation as such. That there is a sense of delightfulness taking place, a sense of openness taking place. And at that level, maybe then we could look in terms of meditation and action, in terms of lakton or vipassana experience. In the experience of vipassana, there is a sense of dignity, there is a sense of completion, definite completion, a definite sense of dignity, sense of knowingness, somewhat familiarity, that as if you've done this in some time ago, many times in your past, you've done this, and now you're doing it again. That sense of that familiarity begin to come. And awareness is that not only pointing your attention to a spotlight alone, but space around that spotlight maybe it's the darkness that around the spotlight, or if you're concentrating on a piece of stone, piece of pebble, that you not only see the pebble, but you see the environment around the pebble. And the sense of expansion, sense of openness begin to take place. And one of the interesting points about the Vipassana experience is that the sense of exertion, sense of discipline is not so much of your discipline, but it is a self-existing experience. And that seems to be the basic point that we should understand. That at a certain point that you have to, of course, hustle yourself and push yourself into the situation that you are going to meditate. Those are just common problems we all have, even if we are advanced meditators, for that matter. Once we get into the practice, we might find it different, but before we begin to push ourselves into the practice, we have all kinds of hesitations, as if we are a naughty child, that you're trying to calculate that anything that you could make excuses that while you're not meditating. It seems to be a valid point to us that I have to make a phone call to my friend, or I have this and that to do my laundry, or wash up the dishes, or take the meat out of the freezer. Any little point that comes to us that we usually play our games to ourselves. Particularly if a person is living individually rather than a community level, that meditation becomes mandatory. That we usually play games to ourselves for those areas which we have to cut through anyway, whether we're practicing the shamatha level practice or vipassana level practice, whatever we do, doesn't really matter. But once we begin to get into the practice and begin to break the ice, so to speak, then we begin to feel that there is a definite sense of a difference, that we could glide into it. We could swim into it. Sense of familiarity, maybe sense of a slight irritation that you're doing the same thing all over again, and a sense of slight being bored and being lonely that you are doing this thing to yourself rather than you're doing with anybody. Even if you're doing with a group of people, it's the same thing, that you are doing this practice by yourself, although the others are doing the same thing, but they're doing their thing, I'm doing my thing. So there's a sense of a loneliness, sense of individuality takes place, but nevertheless, there's a general notion of sense of gliding into into the practice of meditation of Vipassana type. Whereas at the level of shamatha type, it is actually a struggle. Training ourselves, we can't glide in ourselves, we have to catch ourselves constantly. And there's a lot of struggle, there's a lot of personal effort is involved. Keep yourself alive in that particular meditation. But in the case of Vipassana level, that there is a sense of gliding into it because of your training. So that seems to be the basic point, that students should start with the Vipassana experience before you start the Vipassana experience, by the way, that once you get into the shamatha experience, thoroughly and completely and fully, and being very faithful to your technique, which is absolutely important, and sense of fearlessness and sense of cutting through your boredom, whatever. And having done that already, then it is possible to glide into your technique, your experience. And at some point, students find things are very easy, very comfortable, that your physiological situation is adapting itself to the sitting practice, that you used to sit down on the cushion, cross-legged, and straighten your back, and everything's a natural thing that comes very naturally to you. And psychologically much simpler, much easier, because you can glide yourself into that situation. But however, there's need to keep this basic sense of openness, awareness, the basic sense of, we could almost say, cleanliness, the cleanliness, that things done properly and literally, that meditation becomes a real thing. There's no areas left that we are deceiving ourselves no longer. In fact, that sense of wholesomeness and healthiness into a practice which ignites further light into the experience of Vipassana experience. The experience becomes very personal, very real, very healthy, and very direct. And the purpose of this training is being eventually that you are going to become warrior. That a warrior should keep his basic being intact, including his alertness. Otherwise, that warrior doesn't become a warrior. So therefore, practicing meditation at this level could be regarded as the experience of training your mind and training your sense of feeling, sense of touch, sense of smell in an appropriate level. That no mysterious areas left at all. That every area is to be explored and trained and worked on, so that we have a different kind of sense of pride in the positive sense. That no mysterious dark corners left. That there is a sense of enormous pride, enormous wholesomeness, completeness. That the universal spiritual search does not become still mysterious anymore. It's very real to us. And one begins to develop also a sense of intellect at the same time, that you can cut yourself or cut others for that matter, and it becomes a very real experience. I think that's the purpose of Vipassana experience. Vipassana technique is to bring ourselves down and down and down to the ground, much more than those of the concentrated experience of shamatha, which is okay, but still needs more down-to-earth level. That finally you begin to realize that sight, smell, sound, and all the other experiences are very direct, very literal, and very simple. And of course, maybe it's beautiful, but no longer mysterious as such. And perhaps you would like to ask questions, maybe that's better than me talking.
You say the way the warrior, and in the next 6 months, maybe a fifth or a quarter of the world will be in extreme hunger, if not famine. And meditation seems very necessary, but action, skillful action, also seems necessary. If the people are governed by immorality at the top too long, a great sickness stays. And meditation and action, I'm waiting for the action in myself and in the world around me. perhaps too impatiently.
Perhaps what?
Too impatiently. The sensation of helplessness in the face of great suffering, brought to you on color television.
Well, I mean, the point here is that before we talk about all hands on the deck, we got to have hands. And the first measure that we're taking is maybe a long-term project. It may not happen, we may be able to practice our awareness and meditation action experience immediately, the next 6 months or so. But the important step to begin with is that we could develop ourselves in such extent that we don't become a nuisance. And that's the starting point, that to begin with, we don't become a nuisance to society. And that is helping a great deal. And it cuts the bureaucracy enormously. And there's less paperwork, there's less typewriters, there's less telephone calls if you stop being a nuisance. And there's less number in the computer machine. And then probably we can, extend from that level. Having not been a nuisance, then maybe you're a full-fledged meditation and action person. But it takes time. It takes enormous time, and therefore it is necessary to apply some sense of exertion in one's practice.
Is there a technique that we use to practice what would be the equivalent of our shamatha practice in our regular life? Some object or technique for concentrating in our daily lives so as to gradually develop vipassana, or is it all supposed to come just from the basic sitting meditation practice?
I think it's the basic sitting practice, actually. I'm afraid so. But at the same time that your vipassana experience could develop from the shamatha experience as you become more confident and familiar with what you're doing. That organic thing, rather than changing a shift of gear, or you'll be uplifted to another technique as such, that technique grows, and you begin to abandon the previous technique as already useless, and you begin to develop new way automatically, that your crutches becomes unnecessary. You begin to learn yourself, you can walk.
Rinpoche, you talk about the dangers of entertainment in the carrying out of daily tasks, in thinking that you're meditating on them. What does one attend to when carrying out daily tasks?
When what?
What does one attend to? What is one mindful of in the carrying out of daily tasks, like washing the dishes or walking?
Well, you see, the thing is that we have been brought up in such a way that we be told we have a purpose of life. We are doing for some particular reason or some particular tasks involved. That somebody might say that you're washing your dishes on behalf of the God. Or on the other hand, the Mahayanists might say that you're washing up your dishes on behalf of all sentient beings. And all kinds of little doctrines developing around that. And I'm doing this in order to develop wisdom. Goodness knows. All kinds of little things that being pushed on us underneath the door. Little notes. But the purpose of this particular practice from this point is not to follow those particular instructions, little messages that are coming to us, but simply do it properly. In fact, we are no longer we can't be open enough or ready enough to do anything if we don't have ourselves get together and tight and trained properly. So the point here is a question of no purpose particularly, but just to do it for its own sake. It doesn't matter about the philosophy, it doesn't matter about the conduct or the purpose or the moralistic thing, but you just do it because it happens and because it is there. You can't chicken out. It's already there with you. So why don't we do it? And that's the basic point. Not for you particularly or not for others, but just simply doing it. That seems to be the basic point. Gentleman in the green.
Is there any difference between the technique of shamatha and vipassana? Is the technique the same?
Well, as far as the technique is concerned, it's pretty much the same, but in the vipassana level, you watch the boundaries more than point of concentration. The boundary of feeling around you, that you are not purely working on your breath, but you're working on the boundary around the breath. That sense of expansion is taking place, the radiation is taking place. That's simply a question of attitude. You see, the point is that there's literal teaching, and as literal, direct, simple teaching begin to develop, then you begin to expand yourself greater and greater, more and more wider level. And one begin to get a sense of, begin to use your intellect subconsciously and imagination at the same time subconsciously as well. So at the time, the attainment of enlightenment, that you got everything together.
I have two questions. In the practice of moving from shamatha to vipassana, does one just move in that, or does one need to push in some way? In other words, is there a danger of becoming comfortable in the practice?
Well, I think, as we've discussed already, that it is necessary to have someone to check your practice, and develop a personal friendship or reference point with somebody is necessary. But at the same time, you could develop your own intelligence for that. Is that when you begin to feel that you have to expand yourself rather than you practice it strictly in the level of being too faithful, and you begin to feel slightly different, that you can expand yourself. And at that level, if you examine yourself in your particular style of experience is concerned, you begin to find yourself actually doing Vipassana experience already, Vipassana technique already, that you transcended the shamatha experience in any case. So one has to take that kind of, it's like growing up, when you grow up, you have this ceremony, called a birthday party, which isn't quite really so. You haven't suddenly become a different person by the time when you blow your candles off or when you get your presents, but you'll be growing up all the time. So, and I think it's a falsity to make to make random and maybe specialized time and the moment that now everything's okay, you'll become different because you had a bar mitzvah or whatever, you know.
Also, where do these two techniques fit in terms of Hinayana and Mahayana paths?
The Vipassana experience is still in the Hinayana level, and the sense of the inspiration and sense of awareness is preparing yourself to become Bodhisattva in the Mahayana level, that you need more requirements of awareness and egolessness. That's just the first hint. But basically the technique is included, according to the doctrine, is that you are doing Hinayana practice still, but preparing yourself to become a Bodhisattva.
Rinpoche, you said in Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism that Vipassana is working more with the emotions. Could you explain that a little bit?
Well, the emotions, at this point is concerned, it's experiential. That awareness that you have around you is also part of the emotions at the same time. That you can't have emotions without being aware of something. If you hate somebody, you dislike somebody intensely, you're not only disliking that person and such, but that black fume that person has created for you around it. So sense of openness is there, that general, how the emotions work. So your practice work at that level, and you are not trying to particularly destroy or subjugate your emotions, suppress them particularly as such, but you are in tune with the style of an emotions taking place at the same time. So you have also anecdotes of some kind is taking place. That emotions, the way the emotions function, how the practice functions at the same time, so they are hand in hand and side by side. And still that you have kept up with your emotions, that usually what happens is that when we have emotions, we find ourselves undermined by our own emotion, we lost track of it, we feel bewildered by our emotions. But once we have a sense of actually we are in keeping with the context with the emotions, what's going on, there's a sense of familiarity, sense of openness taking place. So precisely the practice is related with that. But if he particularly referred to this thing about emotions being especially trying to work with the emotions, you're going to get relief, freedom from your emotions, and that's precisely the reason I haven't discussed tonight about talking about emotions, and that seems to become too much of a trip of some kind. That you have that problem, now I'm going to present you this technique so you can control yourself precisely. But give people some sense of experience that the awareness could work with the general dealing with the environment, which emotions are, basically.
I was wondering, like, when you sit in a doctrine or meditate for some period of time, is there any emphasis placed on physical exercise, or do your muscles just start to atrophy, or what?
You should what?
I mean, like, what happens to your body when you sit for a month or 3 months or something? Is there any emphasis placed on physical exercise?
Well, you sit and you walk all the time. And that whole practice is based on half and half sitting and walking. And there's a lot of emphasis on how to handle with your body in the sense of relating with the Vipassana type experience automatically. But at the same time, I don't think we have to re-crank up ourselves particularly because of that our body is just about to get out of practice in running around the world. And I mean, that's been taken care of already by our mind. That we usually run around much faster in that two situations. The first few weeks, you run around so much. You dig up your record of the past and your future plans of the future, you know. And you've done so much hard work already. And that affects the muscle system in your body. You find yourself seeing as if you're running. You are sitting, but still you're running. And you get a lot of exercise out of that.
I have another question, and that is, in sitting meditation, I get really distracted by visual images and colors with my eyes open, you know. I wonder if that'll go away with time, you know, if that'll just pass as thoughts or what.
No promise. But you probably will give up at some point, rather than that it will be that you'll solve your problem as such, but that you might give up. It's a question of you might give up, you might surrender, rather than that the problem will be solved as such.
The idea of warrior is usually associated with a purpose, territory, or at least a sense of danger. If we're to give up all sense of territory and purpose, I would think danger would also fall away. What's the motivation for having the spirit of warrior? Is it the spirit of inquiry, to see?
Well, you are not hired as a samurai who's out of a job. You are not hired by anybody, or even not hired by yourself. And I think warrior has a sense of fearlessness, basic fearlessness, that there is no reason why you should be a coward. As simple as that. And you are not being warrior because there is a state of war existing in your country that we're trying to win over against the Rudras or the ego of the people. We're trying to fight with them. But you're being warrior because you are a warrior. It's like saying the same thing, that are you 21 years old? Yes, I am. And you might ask a question, the same question, by saying that why you are 21 years old. And how come you have done this? But you have no answer to it. You are just 21. That's what I am. And there's a basic sense of unshakableness, obviously, not because you feel that somebody's going to shake you as such, particularly unmovability, sense of dignity, sense of self-existing situation, rather than you're trying to fight something else. It's a different concept that we have to become more familiar with that particular situation rather than the pure relative point. And that needs a lot of training, actually, that the question of obtaining enlightenment as well, and the question of controlling ourselves, and the question of being generous, being disciplined, that if I be generous, what I'm going to get back? If I be well disciplined, what I'm going to achieve? And those questions doesn't imply that you're doing things just because it is the case. That's what's called satya, or the truth. Ultimate thing. The truth doesn't depend on anything, that's the problem. I'm afraid, not very glamorous. But still, it's the case, nevertheless.
There's some meditative techniques that begin with Vipassana on the basis that mindfulness increases mindfulness, which extends itself into prajna. You seem to be saying that that comes naturally, or you shouldn't start at that point. Is that a valid technique?
Well, I think it had to be organic. You see, again, we have a certain problem, that if you decide to present some situations as such, that you are going to gain prajna, that becomes spiritual materialism. And you have a goal, you have an idea, that the sense of boredom hasn't been presented to you yet. So the point is that to begin with, just very simple technique without any purpose, idea, almost naive and absurd in many ways. And then you begin to grow, because it's a question of training your mind, that how to become a more awake person, that as you fall asleep at the beginning and then you go to sleep and let you be that way, and then you begin to wake up, you begin to open your eyes, and then next thing is just to get out of your bed and wash your face, or whatever you do. It's an organic process. And I think that's the problem with introducing Vipassana at a very early level. It's become a problem. And that has become a problem within the Buddhist traditions as well already. There's a lot of disagreements happening, or agreements taking place within the great meditation masters in the Buddhist tradition already as well. That if you introduce the juice or the meat of this particular soup too early, that you don't want to drink your soup, you just want to have the anecdotes. And the result is you end up being very thirsty.
It seems though mindfulness would encourage the awareness of even that problem, wouldn't it? Which would become an object of mindfulness.
Well, you see, we have a problem with the mindfulness. And mindfulness is, if you present a person of mindfulness on the first batch, just like that, to laymen, so to speak, that mindfulness is just being mindful, is having the attitude of mindfulness, rather than the experience of being right there. You see, it's mindfulness, from that point, it also means awareness. But true mindfulness, not particular awareness, but simply communicating with things as they are. Very simply, very literally, very directly. And it becomes very personal. That the mindfulness, you see, the situation is that when you're being mindful, you have a certain pride and a certain sense of security. But you have to include all of those in your mindfulness. Otherwise, your mindfulness is game. And that is the problem. Always, that's the problem. That's been faced. There's a new tradition developed in the Burmese method. Mahasi Sayadaw has developed, and so forth, that also developed in Tibetan tradition. What's called the indivisibility of shamatha and vipassana experience. Now that's particular training what we are talking about. That even when we talk about a shamatha experience, there is some sense of vipassana experience that comes known. That whole thing is included, but we don't make a particular reference point as to promises are concerned. That's simply the basic point. You just do it, you just do your donkey work, and if you ask about enlightenment, you'll be told to shut up. Just do your thing.
Intellect develops alongside the development of meditation, I would guess.
I think that's the right guess.
Could you say something?
That's not a guess, but that's experience, what you said. And it is possible, it is true, that when there is an experience that makes your mind much sharper, beyond a confused world level, that you begin to learn to think more objectively, more directly, for the very reason of the experience. Experience you had is experience of egoless, constantly diminishing, because there's less ego territory, therefore there's more room to develop intellect at the same time.
I assume that through the process of meditation, the egolessness increases, but I wonder if there's any point or any sense to trying to do our acts, our day-to-day acts, with a view to reducing the ego, a view to doing things that are less from the ego.
Can you say the last part more?
I wonder if there's any point in doing our day-to-day acts with a view to doing acts that are less directed towards the ego, to satisfying the ego.
Well, you got to eat. You got to go to the bathroom. You need a roof over your head. You have to earn money for that. For your food as well, I suppose. So things becomes very problematic. But on the other hand, things are very simple, because one has to do these things. Those are not particularly hassles of the universe, but those are the facts of the universe, the truth that we're talking about, dharma, satya. And that's necessary, I think, that if we're seeking truth, we have to work, eat, shit, sleep. That's the expression of truth, and we got to do it. We have to earn money to do that as well at the same time. Good luck, sir.
When you talk about cutting through so there's no more mystery, when you talk about cutting through things so there's no more sense of mystery, it seems to me like Don Juan, even though he's very clear and very strong, he still sees in the world around him mystery.
I can't figure out what you're asking me.
It seems like what you're doing is making everything very cold, very dry, you know? Like cutting through things so there's no more sense of mystery or beauty.
Thank you. Well, you see, it's an old story. Actually. If you open somebody's stomach, cut through their skin, you've got blood and all kinds of juicy things coming out. And it's not particularly, the approach is not so much of make things sterile and vacant, but we have a lot of stuff in us all the time, and we can't use them because they'll be bottled up. And by cutting through, breaking the bottle is the only way that they exist. And it is possible, once you cut through the skin, there are a lot of things coming out, gushing out. That's possible. And I think even your question feels very juicy, because you feel something had been cut through, but at the same time you have a lot of ideas coming out of that, and what you did, and that's a perfect demonstration of it. Thank you, madam. Maybe it's time to stop. Thank you.